Hello and welcome to Chapter 12. Lily dried her hair with the warm woolen towel Robert had found her, and when she was finally done, Thaddeus beckoned her through to the workshop. The room was dimly lit, the skylight in the ceiling frosted with snow. She looked around the walls, hung with brass tools and clock bodies. Something stirred in a box full of blankets in the corner, making a low ticking sound. It pricked up its ears and raised a foxy head. "Lily!" Malkin jumped up and hobbled over shakily. Lily was so relieved to see Malkin alive. She put down her bundle and fell to her knees, throwing her arms around his neck and hugging him close. "Malkin! You're here! I was certain you'd been destroyed by that terrible air crash." Lily stroked Malkin's scruffy fur until his tongue lolled out the side of his black-lipped mouth and his bushy tail swept back and forth. It was good to see him. If he'd found help, surely Papa could have too. Couldn't he? She was almost afraid to ask, but she had to know the truth. "What happened that night, Malkin?" she whispered. Malkin's ears drooped, and he shook her hand away, hanging his head sheepishly. "So John did not return?" he asked. "I had hoped he might have escaped the attack. A silver airship harpooned Dragonfly and tried to board, but I thought they might. I thought John maybe survived." He stopped and pawed at his snout with one black forepaw. Lily felt a pang of despair. It was true then, what everyone said about Papa. He was probably dead. Her hope faded. Malkin must have sensed it, for he tilted his head and gave her a foxy smile. "By all the cogs in Christendom, Lily, it's marvellous to see you. I would jump for joy if it wasn't for my injured leg." "Was it the men with silver eyes?" Lily asked. Though she'd an inkling it must have been. "Roach and Mould." The fox gave a mechanical growl. "So those are their names. Their clanking vagabonds chased me from the crash site. They're after something of John's. I'll warrant. They must suppose I have some tick-tock of its whereabouts. The truth is, I know nothing." Lily sighed. Her gaze strayed to the bundle on the floor. Was all this because some invention hidden inside that box? Was that why those men had attacked Malkin and Papa? And if so, what could she do to stop them? She wasn't strong or clever. She hadn't even managed to find the key yet. "They came to our house," she told Malkin. "Roach followed me from school on the commuter Zepp. Then they took Mrs. Rust and the rest of the mechanicals away. Madame even helped them. But I do think what they're after is in here. It's Papa's old box. Do you have the key?" Malkin snuffled at the box under the blanket, prodding at it with his nose. "Afraid not," he said, "but perhaps you might clock some clue in John's correspondence." Lily looked up. "Correspondence?" "Yes. Did this gangly pup not tell you?" Malkin bared his teeth at Robert and gave him a stern growl. "Your father left you a letter. I have it here in my pouch." "Oh!" said Lily, and then she didn't know what to say, because there was a finality to it somehow. Whatever the words were in that letter, they were very possibly Papa's last goodbye. She gave a sniff and wiped a hand across her face. Then, steeling herself, she reached out and stroked Malkin's chin while she untied the pouch from around his neck with her other hand. The leather felt soft and damp, but when she smoothed out the folds, she was dismayed to find the centre of the pouch was singed with a small hole, evident on both sides. Malkin's dark eyes rounded at the sight of it. "Crankshafts! It must be from that clanking bullet that got me." Fingers shaking, Lily fumbled with the drawstring and pulled an envelope from within the pouch. Her name was written in its centre in Papa's hand. To her relief, she found the bullet hole had only passed through the corner of the envelope. Perhaps the contents were still readable. She turned it over, and on the other side, covering the flap, she found her Papa's scrawled hieroglyph intact. She opened the envelope and unfolded the single-page letter. But it was not as she'd hoped. The bullet had singed a hole in the folds of paper, burning straight through the heart of Papa's words, and though she peered closely, many were unreadable. "What's it say?" Malkin's ears flicked forward and he waited expectantly. "Yes, what does it say?" Robert asked. Lily looked at them both and at Robert's father standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with the desire to help. She took a deep breath and read Papa's words aloud. At least the ones she could make out round the big black hole. Oh dear. My darling Lily, your life is more precious than anything, not just because of what I'm about to tell you, but because you are my only beloved daughter, the heart of my life. And these secrets are things I meant to divulge long ago. Dragonfly is unreadable. From my past that is about to catch up, something, were born. Professor Silverfish, perpetual motion machine, full stop. The plan was replace their heart with clock, hid the machine, full stop. But bad people, they killed Mama and injured. Fateful day I had to use the... No. Afterwards we found a new home, Long to tell you this. It was all because Silverfish, your godfather, he was a good friend. Something be trusted. Find somewhere safe, my darling, and never reveal the truth to anyone, for it will put you in grave danger. Your loving Papa, Kiss. Oh dear. And indeed, most of that letter was unreadable. Dark images whirled in Lily's head as she finished reading the letter. The crash, her injuries, Mama's death, they'd all been deliberate, a planned attack. Roach and Mould, or men like them, had murdered Mama trying to get hold of Papa's machine. That's why he changed their name and moved them to the countryside, and that's why he never spoke of the past, not to try and forget the horrible things that happened, but to hide from them. But if Papa's enemies were capable of murder, then they were capable of anything. They'd made Papa disappear, and now they were coming after her. They were more dangerous than she could have possibly imagined. Lily felt a dizzying fear. She took a deep breath. When she finally looked up, the others were watching her with slight concern. She glanced once more at the letter, and 3 strange words jumped out at her. Perpetual motion machine. What does it mean? She asked, looking around, hoping one of them might know. It's a device which requires no power, Thaddeus explained. It runs on its own momentum, forever, without stopping. But as far as I know, such a thing is only an idea. It hasn't actually been invented. Unless your father created one. He glanced down at the box in its bundle. If there truly is one in there, then it's certainly a compact machine, and probably the most valuable thing that currently exists in this world. He laughed nervously. Valuable enough to kill Mama for, Lily said, grief heavy in her chest. It's true, Papa had that box with him on the night she died. I remember. I saw it in my dream. She glanced at their faces, full of horror. He always told me it was an accident, but it was something much worse, and now it's happening again. She laid down her letter and stared at Malkin. You must tell me what occurred on that airship, she said, and I want the truth this time, not the rubbish Madame Verdigris told me. Malkin eyed Robert and his father suspiciously. I don't know whether I can speak frankly in front of them. Us? But we just saved your life, Robert blurted. Thaddeus shushed him. Do you want us to leave, Miss Hartman? No, it's fine. It's not a pleasant story, the fox said. In fact, it's positively talking awful. Lily took a deep breath. Tell me anyway, she said. I have to know the truth. All right, but I imagine no good will come of it. He sat up and shook his head from side to side, rattling the loose parts in his skull. It was as if he was trying to get what he wanted to say clear in his mind before he spoke. We were flying home to Brackenbridge, John and I. We'd been on a secret trip to buy mechanical parts. Upon our return journey, we were attacked by a silver airship with a pointed hull. I remember jumping up at the window to look back at it. It was bristling with spikes like some weaponized... I saw that ship, Robert interrupted. It flew over the village the night you came here. Malkin gave him a pointed look. Lily knew this was because he didn't like to be interrupted. Go on, she prompted. Well, Dragonfly couldn't fight such air power. She's not a warship, after all. Our only option was to try and outrun them. Unfortunately, we failed. John was able to get me into the escape pod, but he stayed with the ship. I tried to argue with him, but he wanted to get it down safely. He released the pod, and as I fell, I saw the other airship drag Dragonfly in, as if they intended to board her. In a crunching explosion, I hit the ground. The pod was bouncing and twisting, turning and spinning, shaking me up like a stone in a tin can, until I thought every cog inside me would be crushed. Then, with a jolt, I came to a stop. The pod's door had burst open on impact and hung loose on the inside wall. Gyros spinning in my head. I crawled towards the door. My hackles raised, I peered over the rubber seal and out of the opening. A deep groove stretched away from the pod, cutting across frosted fields, leaving a trail of broken branches and debris. I heard the screech of clashing metal and glanced up. The two airships were locked tight together. Suddenly, Dragonfly was cut loose and drifted in a fluttering tailspin. When she reached a distance of 3 ship lengths, the other Zep fired, and I saw Dragonfly explode in a whoosh of flames. My heart cog skipped as I watched her burning fragments fall. Whether they took John prisoner, I cannot say, but either way, it didn't look good. And from what he says about your mother in the letter... Malkin paused and gave a snuffling cough. I was winding down fast, couldn't hang around any longer. The moment I crashed, I knew they'd send a ground crew looking out for me. Quickly, I stepped over the door seal and darted into the foggy night, and then I ran. I knew I couldn't stop until I found you. Malkin shuddered. But it seems my journey's been as futile as a broken cam spring. If I have no real solutions, Lily, and my rivals put you in even more danger, as I have led the enemy to you. He tipped his head apologetically at her. Lily reached out and stroked his chin once more. She felt Papa's absent more keenly than ever. He would have known what to do. Roach and Mould would have found me eventually, she said. I think Madame Verdigris is working with them. She told them our real name and where we live. That gear-grinding woman. I always knew she was a bad lot. Lily put the letter in her pocket and stared in despair at the bundle on the floor. We may have learned the truth about Mama, but we've still no concrete answers about Papa or this machine. And in a way, things are worse than before. I can't go home because those men and Madame are there, and I can't stay here either because they have their suspicions about Robert already. What on earth am I to do? We'll think of something, Robert said. Thaddeus put a hand on her shoulder. And perhaps, he said, while we do, a little tea and toast would not go amiss. It was a funny little kitchen on the first floor above the shop, tucked under the eaves and full of odd angles. Lily watched Thaddeus fill the copper kettle at the sink in the corner, while Robert stoked the fire in the large blackened range, bringing it back to life. Do you want any help, Mr. Townsend? She asked. The clockmaker shook his head. Oh, no, thanks, young lady, and please call me Thaddeus. You must make it easy. You must take it easy. You've had a trying few days. He handed the kettle to Robert, who put it on top of the range to boil. With a sense of relief, Lily settled herself at the kitchen table. Malkin, who had been on edge since their discussion, crawled under her chair and sat by her heels, with one black-tipped ear pricked up, listening to the conversation. Get the things for tea, Robert, Thaddeus said, and Robert fetched 3 mugs from the dresser, took some bread and cheese from the larder, and laid everything out higgledy-piggledy on the table. Thaddeus eased himself into a seat opposite Lily and got out his tobacco to prepare a pipe. May I look at your father's box? He asked, when he had his pipe lit and was puffing away. Lily undid the blanket and placed the box on the table in front of him. Thaddeus pushed his glasses down to the end of his nose and picked up the box, turning it around in his hands. This was a well-made thing, not designed to be opened without the key. Even its hinges are on the inside. As Thaddeus peered closely at the lock, Lily looked at its back and saw he was right. She hadn't noticed before, but there were no hinges outside. So these men think that this contains a perpetual motion machine. And do they have the key? I don't know, Lily swallowed, and her stomach gave a grumble. She reached across the table and took some bread and cheese. Perhaps, she said, they thought Malkin or I would know where it was, or how to open it for them. When this snowstorm is over, we should take the matter to the police. Lily was too busy eating to reply, but Robert answered for her. Those men said they were the police, Dar, a secret police. Of course they did, Thaddeus nodded. But do we believe them? It seems unlikely, Lily said, through mouthfuls of bread. But if not, how would they have so many resources at their disposal? Thaddeus put the box down. A tricky situation. He puffed on his pipe, and when it went out, relit it with a match. Perhaps. He reached into the pocket of his trousers and took out a small keyring full of different sized keys. Lily swallowed her mouthful and held her breath as he flicked through them and tried a few in the lock. He shook his head. Nope, no good. What about your penknife, Robert? Robert handed it to him. From the folding elements within the casing, Thaddeus opened out a small, sturdy screwdriver. He tried to force it in under the rim of the lid, but that didn't work either. The clanking thing's on too tight. We should smash it open, Robert suggested. But then we might damage what's inside, Thaddeus said. Everyone moved in closer to peer at the lid, and when the kettle whistled, Lily nearly jumped out of her skin. Robert took it from the stove and poured 3 mugs of tea with milk and sugar, then handed them around. Thaddeus, a little agitated now, brushed his aside. May I see the letter as well? He asked, handing Robert back his penknife. Lily took the letter from her pocket and passed it to him. As he read, Thaddeus glanced up every now and then, frowning at the box. When he'd finally finished, he folded the page and placed it back into the envelope. What about this fellow John mentions, Professor Silverfish? Who's he? Oh, he's my godfather. When I was small, he was always coming to visit Papa. They had a business together, a big factory creating mechanicals, but Papa sold up his share after they had some sort of falling out. That's right. I remember. John told me a little about that. I think there was a difference of opinion about the type of mechs they wanted to create. Your father was interested in machines with feelings, while Professor Silverfish wanted to make ones that ran longer. Seemed the business did very well, but then Professor Silverfish left the country for some reason, after your mother died. It was his heart. Lily took a sip from her cup of milky tea, cupping her hands around the warm china to absorb its heat. He came to see me when he heard of Papa's disappearance. I think he wanted to apologise. Make everything right again. She drank the last sugary mouthfuls of tea from her mug. If he knew your da well, Robert said, perhaps he'll have some clue about this box. That's right. He might have been part of their work together. And any clue could help us lead us to Papa, Lily added, for she still so wanted to believe that he was alive. Perhaps he's a prisoner somewhere. Maybe. Thaddeus didn't sound convinced about that part. If only you had an idea where this Silverfish character lived, then we can go and ask for his advice, Malkin muttered from under his chair. But I do know where he lives. She took out Professor Silverfish's card and placed it on the table. He gave this to me and told me if I was ever in trouble, he would help. Thaddeus took the card and whistled. Riverside Walk, Chelsea. This is a smart London address. He must be an important, well-to-do man. He pushed back his chair. We shall go see him at once. We? Lily said. Yes. Robert and I will escort you. Thank you, but I couldn't ask you to take such a risk. Nonsense! Those roach men, or whatever they're called, are obviously dangerous. We will accompany you until you arrive safely at your destination. First thing in the morning, we shall shut up shop and take you on the train to visit this fellow. Can we go by Zep? Robert asked. Thaddeus shook his head. They'll be expecting that. Besides, we can't afford it. No, a train's better, and there are more passengers, so it'll be easier to blend in. Thaddeus smiled at them both. Why don't you go and get Miss Hartman some of your old clothes to wear tomorrow, Robert? It's best if she travels incognito. Besides, she'd freeze to death in just that dress. Robert sighed. He stood and went out into the hall. Lily heard him open a door further off, and he returned a moment later with a patched jacket, corduroy trousers, and a grey felt cap. They should be about your size. Used to be mine a year ago. No, that's Robert. They should be about your size. Used to be mine a year ago, before I grew too tall for them. Should make a decent disguise. Thank you. Lily put the card and the Robert in the pockets of his jacket and tried it on. The jacket was warm and comfortable and smelled slightly of mothballs and of him. Not a bad fit, Thaddeus said, and even Malkin perked up, scrambling from under the seat to peer at her. Is there a looking glass? Lily asked. Over on the wall, Robert pointed behind her. She stood and examined herself in the mirror. The jacket sloped off her shoulders and the sleeves came nearly to her fingertips, but she actually quite liked it. She folded the cuffs back over each wrist, exposing the moth-eaten silken lining. Then she ran a hand through her hair, so matted and clumped. "It looks an awful muddle," she said. "That's what caps are for," Robert told her. She wedged the cap on over her hair and tipped the brim down to hide her eyes a little. "What do you think, Malkin?" she asked the fox. He angled his head, and his black eyes narrowed, taking her in. "You look like a vagabond." "I rather like it." She peered closer at herself and smiled. How horrified the Kraken or Madame would be if they saw her now. Suddenly she felt a little better. Thanks to Malkin and Papa's letter, she had some clues as to what was going on, and thanks to Robert and his father, she had a disguise and a plan. Perhaps together they'd solve this mystery and find Papa after all. "It's a funny thing," she said, talking to her reflection, "but I always felt something of a tomboy inside. This way my outside matches that better, wouldn't you say?" "True." Malkin gave a wide pink-mouthed yawn. Thaddeus glanced at his wristwatch. "Heavens! Look at the time! We'd best get some sleep if we're to catch the first train." As soon as he said this, Lily realised how tired she was. She glanced over at Robert and saw his eyes drooping too. "We'll make up the day bed in the corner for you," Thaddeus said. "It's beside the range, so it's the warmest place in the house." He and Robert went out into the hall once more and returned moments later with a pile of blankets. When they finished making the bed for her, they retired to their rooms. Lily lay down on the daybed and found it rather soft. She pulled the blankets over herself and plumped the cushions. She could not sleep at first. Tears itched at her eyes, and black thoughts of all she'd learned crowded her mind. Roach and Mould were dangerous men to be up against, and things were far worse than she could have possibly imagined a few days ago. But at least she had help now. She touched the scar on her chest, remembering Mamma long gone, killed for a secret, a perpetual motion machine in a locked box, and then Papa, who tried to hide that truth from her. Now he'd gone too. She missed him most of all. The hurt felt keen and sharp, as if a new cut had been made deep in her chest. But beside that sat a soft glimmer of hope that he might still be alive somewhere. If she could only open the box, she was sure she'd discover a clue that would help find him. Malkin padded over and licked her face with his rough tongue. Then he climbed across her lap, and soon the ticking of his little heart helped her drift off to sleep.